Hey everybody, Christine Mercer here from Her Screen Thoughts to do another podcast as well as a YouTube video around what I consider to be a mind-blowing series just launched by Netflix, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I wanted to talk about Honora. So when the Academy Awards rolled around, and anybody who's listened to this podcast for the last whatever years knows I don't like the Academy Awards. I don't think they really speak to who's had works of excellence, and it's just too political, and I don't know, I don't even watch it anymore. So imagine my surprise when after Honora won, which by the way I do think I want to see because everything I've read about it says it's worth seeing. But it was made with a budget of $6 million. And if you look at the Academy Awards this year, more and more independent films, less studio films, are coming to the forefront for the awards sector. So that's interesting in itself. And maybe that's a good thing. I think it probably is. But Honora was made with $6 million. Okay, newsflash, guess how much they spent uh, to secure their Oscar nomination and to market it in a campaign to have it win. They spent more than any film ever in the history of campaigns for Oscars. They spent $18 million on marketing this film. Now, okay, that's three times what they spent on the film itself. What does that tell you? Isn't it time for us to wake up and smell the money, follow the money? This doesn't make sense. Why we give them the ability to think that perhaps we're actually putting forth movies and people are actually watching them. I think people vote without watching them. I know I would. So, anyway, I just want to put that out there, and I don't want to start on a negative note, but I think the movie is worth seeing anyway. But I think shame on him. And not only that, he admitted it. At least that's something that's sort of good because who would normally admit something like that? I certainly wouldn't have. So, we're going to move on, though. We're going to move on to Screen Thought's new film. So I originally was going to do a joint podcast and review for Adolescence and Douglas is Canceled. I thought that both series, Douglas is Canceled and Adolescence, took two major evils in our society, especially in America. I hate to say it, not surprising, bullying and sexual abuse in the workplace. And they really dug deeper, but they dug deeper in a way that was filled with just a little bit of compassion, maybe. Not in the sense of anything's excusable at all, but just where you could understand the pathways that led to different things. So I thought, oh, I'll do them together. That'll be great. And then I realized that it's too much. I mean, who could possibly handle it? So I'm going to start with Netflix #1 series, Adolescence. Okay, so okay, I think it dropped about a week ago, and it became #1 in 5 minutes. That's how quickly it was picked up. But I also think it was by word of mouth. Everybody I know who's watched it has watched it. It's a 4 episode series. Each episode is 40 plus minutes. Um, and I don't know anybody who watched it over a long period of time, 1 to 2 days, maybe max. Okay. But it was Stephen Graham, who plays the father in this, by the way, who is the co-creator and the co-writer of it, and he was inspired to develop the series after he encountered all these articles he was reading, stories about young boys committing violent acts against girls. And as he stopped and sort of thought it through, he thought, I really am concerned about this, and I think we need to do something about it. And here's what he said about it. He said, I was reading the paper, and there was an article about a young boy who'd stabbed a young girl to death. And then a couple of months later, I was watching the news, and there was a piece on there about a young boy who'd stabbed a young girl to death. And these were at opposite ends of the country. So this reoccurring pattern, if you will, affected him, and it led him to question the societal factors contributing to these tragedies. Um, so he went on to say, it hurt at my heart. Now, by the way, when you see him in this show, and he's one of the reasons to watch it, you're going to see that he really understands how to show a hurt heart. I will often say, especially when I see things on social media where there's a dog or an animal, whatever, oh my God, that hurts my heart. But he said it hurt at my heart. Being a father myself, I just thought, what's happening with our young men today in society that this is becoming a regular occurrence? So it was pivotal. That moment was pivotal for him in the creation of Adolescence. But um, Jack Thorne and Philip Barantini were also involved in a big way. Philip Barantini is the director, and Jack Thorne was the co-writer with Stephen Graham. So what's interesting about it is the way they did it is they filled filmed the 4 episodes continuously within the episode. So each episode unfolds in real time through a continuous shot. And but A, we don't see the pain of what that must have caused. We don't see mistakes of how they couldn't quite get it right for 40 minutes. We don't see any of that. It is done that well. So Barantini is known for this expertise because he loves single take productions like he did Boiling Point, which he, brought a bunch of stuff to the experience on that too. But the nature of having to film each episode in a single shot, just it calls for an incredible planning, coordination between the writers and the director, and then tons of rehearsals, rehearsal, rehearsal, rehearsal. And they were conducted to choreograph the actors' movements, excuse me, and the camera work to make sure that the emotional depth isn't lost and that the pacing is right. And anyway, it was well worth the extra effort because I think it just makes it, absolutely makes it. Now, our first episode, and I'm not giving anything away to say that the kid actually did the murder. You find out within the first 5 minutes, um, but the first episode is when they break in, they remove this 11-year-old from his home, and then they go to the police station and the interrogation. And it's from the moment they go in to pick him up until they show the actual evidence that they've got, and everybody realizes that he, in fact, did it. So that's the first episode. Excellent, excellent, excellent. The second episode, which some people have said is probably the weak link, but I don't think it is. I think it's critical because if we're going to really lay out this problem and what leads to it, the second episode, which takes place at the school in which both children attended, and we see the dynamics of how messed up everything is, including bullying and the action of social media, and everybody's on their phones, and just the nuances of it all as they go in and they try to figure out what happened that caused all this. So the second episode takes place in the school. Okay, the third episode takes place 9 months after he's been arrested, and it takes place in the detention home that it was put in. And it's a conversation between he and his a therapist that they brought in. So I spent a lot of time looking at a series that I loved quite a while ago. I think gosh, was it really that long ago? It was, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. Um, and it had a 7-minute conversation between two police officers, two women. And that 7-minute conversation was a lot of talk because normally you don't do 7 minutes of a conversation. And it was very bold for the director to include it that way, etc. And here we are, not that many years later, and we're talking about an entire episode that really, most of which is the conversation between this therapist and this young kid. Now, the kid is Owen Cooper. And he plays Jamie Miller, the killer. It's even hard to call him that when you sort of look at it all. Okay, I can't help but think all the way through it, I kept thinking, is he going to be okay after playing this part? Is he gonna be all right? I'm a little worried about him. And, I don't know if he can be okay. I think that part probably took a lot out of him, a lot out of him. But he's very, very good. Everyone is very, very good. And if this is not at the top of the award list next year, I swear I'm going to go and I'm going to be a protester of one in front of the Golden Globes. It just has to be right at the height. Now, the last episode, which I found the most difficult to be in, is the family. It's the breakup of the family, and it takes place 12 months after the event, and it happens to be the father's birthday, and just things fall apart. And yet, it also does wrap it up to show the total devastation of what these things can do. So then I started to say, okay, what is it that I'm learning here? Because it's a learning series. I mean, it's also, I mean, you wish in some cases you didn't start it, but you have to start it. It's important to know. So the first question I kept feeling was coming up was, how does a child commit an act like this? So um, he's not portrayed as a monster. He's portrayed as a boy with pain and confusion and rage, buried rage. Oh my God, buried rage. And you know what? You can sort of see where it came from. So, and it demands that we sit in the discomfort and consider what is festering beneath the surface in so many of these lives around us, these kids today, the bullying especially. Why is this still happening, you might ask? Okay. So then the next question, whenever there's a school shooting or anything like this, is where were the parents? Okay, that's that fourth episode. It's one of the hardest elements to watch is how the family unravels and what they missed and what they are blaming themselves for and etc. It doesn't blame them outright, but it certainly forces us to look at the modern parenting aspects that we have now. And then it goes into the online bullying. I don't even need to say more, but it's really going to help you understand just the devastation that that calls for and how we really have to pay attention to understand that kids come home and they don't tell you what's going on. And whether your child is the child that's bullied or the child that's doing the bullying, it's really important to to talk about. So I work with somebody who was bullied as a child on the bus, and or she told me about it on the bus, and I was talking to her about all of this, and we were discussing the series, and then she told me another incident of her bullying. And I said, well, wait, so it wasn't just on the bus? And she started laughing, like, what do you think? It's just on the bus? Like bullying for buses? What, I mean, what is that? And so I realized that we need to look at that, but we also need to understand you don't really know your child necessarily. You know how your child performs within your family, but we've got to look a little bit deeper. We got to get involved in their lives more, and that there's also a systemic failure and individual responsibility. Okay, so I think it goes back and forth a bit between the system's failures and Owen's own responsibility for what he did. I think it goes back and forth really well. And I don't think you can answer one or the other. I think it is a combination of this two. So I don't I don't know anything more to say other than be sure and watch this film. And I don't think it's good for children. And I don't even think it's good for tweens or even teens necessarily to watch. I think this is really for parents to watch and for citizens to watch. And if you don't have kids that age, watch it because you can understand how the news headlines become what they are. So I'm going to end with that this week and say it's going to be number one for a long time to come. Make sure you see it before it falls off the number one slot. And make sure you talk about it both to yourself and to others. I've done a lot of thinking about it since I saw it. And anyway, next week we'll do something funner, I promise. And I hope you all have a great week. And don't forget, Adolescence, Netflix, number one. Don't forget. Okay, talk to you soon.